Timeless 106.1 FM, KFFB. Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of our Open Mic program. And we do have Attorney General Leslie Rutledge with us right now. And Leslie, thanks so much for taking time and talking with us again here on Open Mic.
Always fun to be on with you on Open Mic, so thank you for having me.
Leslie, one thing it just seems like we got to keep this in front of everyone. The stimulus debit cards are coming out, and it's very easily to do is throw it away because you think it's just junk mail. Explain what folks need to be watching for.
Indeed, and we saw this happen months ago when the first round of stimulus checks and prepaid debit cards were mailed out because of the envelopes they were mailed in, that so many Arkansans and Americans simply threw them away because they thought it was junk mail. However, if you receive an envelope that has the U.S. Treasury seal on the outside of it, open it first. And it may have a debit card or a check in it, and that is your money from the U.S. government. The IRS and the U.S. Treasury Department have started sending those out recently, and we want to make sure that Arkansans are not throwing away that money because we want to make sure that you have access to those funds so that way you can take care of yourself and your families during this pandemic.
And sometimes it's a little slow. I mean, that's something that has got nothing to do with you personally as a person waiting for that. It's a lot of those cards being sent out. So it just depends on where you fall on that delivery.
Indeed, and unfortunately, we are dealing with government, and it is sometimes it can be slow, and there are millions and millions of Americans receiving these stimulus funds. If you believe that you have thrown it away or have already received it or someone else has sadly stolen that from you, please contact the IRS, the U.S. Treasury. Always feel free to call us at the Attorney General's office, and we can help you with that. Our number is 800-482-8982. That's 800-482-8982. You can find us at arkansasag.gov. Again, folks, we want you to have those funds from the federal government so that way you can use it to take care of yourselves and your families and not be struggling during these challenging times. So please don't throw those cards away or those checks away from the U.S. government.
Another thing we got to talk about is a lawsuit. Big tech companies has just took over the news of a lot right now for a lot of people. But there was a lawsuit I want to talk about first, and that was the Google lawsuit. You've teamed up with many attorney generals. Explain what this lawsuit's all about.
Indeed, and yes, the big tech companies are showing exactly how big, how strong, and potentially how scary they can be. But this is nothing new to those of us who have been pushing back against big tech, seeing how dangerous they can be. And we've got two lawsuits already ongoing with regard to Google. And one of them we joined with the Department of Justice back in October of 2020. It was an antitrust lawsuit. We also joined with 8 other attorneys general in December of 2020 to file a antitrust lawsuit against Google. And essentially, our investigations and concerns were that big tech was creating a marketplace that was not a free marketplace. And so we want companies to succeed, and we want to see companies succeed, but we also don't want Google being the gatekeeper to the internet and creating monopolies on the search advertising. So think about, I'm a mom of a 2.5-year-old. Now, granted, I have a great pediatrician, but if my daughter was sick in the middle of the night and I searched, if I Googled, if you will, to try to get the best help for my daughter, I want to know what is the best help for my sick child. I don't want to know what Google says is the best help based on who's paying the most in advertising to them. And so we, again, brought these lawsuits on behalf of the state of Arkansas against Google already. That's 2 separate lawsuits. So we have already been pushing back against Google. We've been pushing back against Facebook way before the last week or so, when everyone else seems to have picked up on how dangerous big tech is. That we have been fighting at the Attorney General's office, big tech, and their power and control over the internet, over access to services, and their violations of antitrust laws.
Well, that brings us to the next question, and that is with the riots. We've talked here, and I want to reiterate, riots is not protest. It doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on. Peaceful protest is when you have 100,000 people in D.C. and they protest every day there. And sometimes the same protesters are paid and they protest for other reasons. I mean, they may be for whatever is going on that day. But protest is nothing wrong with that 100,000 showed up in D.C. It's those that riot. Rioters are breaking the law, and you've stated that as well here in Arkansas.
Indeed, and unfortunately, over the past year, we have seen a growing number of Americans, even Arkansans, who have taken to the streets in violence over their differences in politics, policy, approach to how we live as a society. We saw that right here in Little Rock this past summer, that what should have been peaceful protests, in which you have a constitutional right to peacefully protest, those should have been peaceful protests. Unfortunately, right here in downtown Little Rock, we saw burning of buildings, we saw destruction of property, we saw many injuries occur, and that was last summer. Yes, all of us were absolutely devastated and appalled when we saw last Wednesday people breaking into the United States Capitol, pushing their way in, harming individuals, destroying property, and resulting, sadly, in the death of a number of individuals now, including police officers. And so we cannot, as a society, tolerate that sort of destruction, violence, and rioting. However, peaceful protests are constitutionally protected, and we must ensure that we have the right to peacefully protest. But what we saw last summer during the marches across the country, including here in Arkansas, as well as what we saw last Wednesday, are one and the same, and that's people who are criminals, who are acting against, in violation of the law, destroying property and harming individuals, and we must take a strong stand, both regardless of what political party, regardless of what ideological stance they may take or policy stance, that we have got to treat all of these individuals the same, and that is as criminals and people who have broken the law.
And that brings us to the next step, which there's the big tech companies, because we had, sometimes you hear this media just pounces on something, plays the same clip over and over and over and over. 100,000 protesters is not lawbreakers, and that's one thing we got to say. No matter what cause, I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat, protesting is great. That is what America was founded on, debate. But then we've seen where I really feel the big tech companies, Apple and Google, deplatform Parler. You can no longer download those apps on either one of those sources. But they were still getting downloads somehow. I'm not sure. I'm not a geeky guy. But then Amazon turned off their servers to Parler. Again, this is a public company. People think that's freedom of speech. Explain that and what can happen when this happens.
Well, it's unfortunate turn of events when you have these big tech companies essentially deciding to cancel culture, and they are canceling the culture of conservative voices on the social media platforms. And this is a very slippery slope when they start censoring free speech. It's dangerous, and it should concern people on all sides of the political spectrums. This kind of censorship from big tech is the kind of thing that we would see in a dictatorship, quite honestly. It's important for Arkansans and Americans to understand that, yes, they do sign a user agreement. However, that we have to take an approach that they have gone, a step too far when they are, holding themselves out to be these platforms of free speech and to share ideas, but yet they only want ideas that they agree with. And we are looking into this. I know attorneys general from across the country are looking into how we can hold these companies accountable for censoring conservative voices. We saw the same sort of attack on conservatives several years ago when conservative groups were being targeted by the IRS, for example, with regard to their tax status. Now conservatives are being censored on social media platforms. As you can imagine, Bob, I have several social media accounts. And yes, like many conservatives, I too have lost followers, a number of individuals that have just disappeared off of my social media platforms. But I also, as I'm on these platforms, I see some very dangerous rhetoric from all angles and from people stating lies, outright lies. And I think that if these social media platforms, if these big tech giants, they want to be in the business of censorship, they are going to be responsible for someone committing dangerous acts across the board. And so when I'm thinking about the defund the police movement, for example, I have attended every service of every law enforcement officer who's been killed in the line of duty in Arkansas since I've been the Attorney General. And for those who have pushed for this anti-law enforcement propaganda and mentality who have pushed to defund the police, they haven't been at these funerals. They haven't hugged those parents. They haven't cried with those spouses and talked to those children about how their daddy would not be coming home. And so, this is a very dangerous and slippery slope that these big tech companies have gone down. And I think it's important that we as Americans step up and say, yes, you're a private company. However, censoring out in this cancel culture is not going to be acceptable.
And what would you say to that person that has been deleted for one of these platforms? Should they contact your office?
They can certainly contact my office at arkansasag.gov. It's arkansasag.gov. And as long as we have an account on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, Pinterest, then they can contact us on that. But please go to arkansasag.gov or call us at 800-482-8982.
And we've been talking with Attorney General Leslie Rutledge. Leslie, I know you've got a busy schedule today, and we appreciate you taking time and talking with us.
Well, thank you. You all have an incredible day, and God bless you all, and let us know what we can do for you, because at the Attorney General's office, we want to do the fighting for you.